So here we go. So welcome back to QuickBooks Session Number 2. And as you know, our instructor for QuickBooks is Karen Magee, and we're excited that she has agreed to take some time from her very busy schedule to help us with this class and to present it today. I don't know how you want to address questions. I know after the last session we said that we would let them ask questions about the first session if they had questions. Would you prefer that at the end of the meeting?
Yeah, and I think this one, we're doing reporting and we're talking about sales tax. So I think if we have questions during, for this one, I think that's okay.
Okay, so you heard her. Just, raise your hand and let her know if you have a question while she's making a presentation. I would like to ask if everybody will make sure that their cell phones are turned off or on vibrate. And with that, I present Karen Magee.
Hello again. Does anybody have any questions from the first one that we did? It was basically just an intro and how to set up your customers and vendors and basic reporting. Well, that's good. My name is Karen Magee. I've been using QuickBooks for a very long time, almost 17 years, I think. I've been a pro advisor for the last 6 years. I haven't really taught it before. I do one-on-one, but not class. I specialize version of QuickBooks or any other accounting software that you're using. It's really important to do certain things, otherwise the numbers that you put in aren't ever going to be the numbers that you want to get out, which are correct. You want to enter your things on a regular basis and stick to it. I know sometimes even I have a hard problem with that, where I have some people that only drop everything off every 3 months or so. And once you get behind, it kind of becomes overwhelming to start getting yourself caught back up again. So really, it helps if you take the time to just sit down and just go through it and just put it in there and get it done. Accuracy and consistency. Again, you want to make sure if you have a water bill that every time you enter it as a water bill and not a water bill one time and just a general utility bill the next time. Because at the end of the day, your reports are going to be right. You want to make sure that you reconcile your bank statements. That's very important. You want to make sure that your checks that you're writing are clearing. You want to make sure that the deposits that you deposit into the bank are going through correctly. I've had a number of times where I've made a deposit to the bank and my deposit slip was correct, and then I go to reconcile the bank statement and the bank statement is showing a different deposit was actually made to the bank. So you really want to make sure that you're reconciling your bank statements. You want to manage your financial statements. That means that you're running your financial statements on a regular basis and you're reviewing them and you're making sure that the transactions that you entered are where they're supposed to be. And you can always ask for help if you need it. If you have a tax professional, your CPA or your accountant that files your annual taxes, give them a call. If you have a question, they want to help you. There are other QuickBooks Pro advisors, or if you have someone else that's helping you maintain the books throughout the year, call them. That's what they're there for. They don't mind answering questions. At least I don't. I hope that whoever you use doesn't as well, but they want to help you. That's what they're there for. So, the first thing that we're going to talk about today is editing preferences in QuickBooks. When I say preferences, I mean your company name, how you want things to show on your home page, on your QuickBooks screen, how you want your transactions to come up when you're entering transactions. And to do that, you go up to your Edit button, and you come all the way down to the bottom, and the selection is Preferences. So you click on that, and you have this big, huge box that comes up with a million choices that's very confusing. And there's a whole bunch of boxes that you can check, and you don't know what any of them means. Really, you have two different choices for every single one of these preferences over here. You have two choices. You have My Preferences and you have Company Preferences. If you have more than one user that uses your QuickBooks, and you have different logins when you have a multi-user system. If you change anything under My Preferences, you're the only one that's going to see those changes. So you can change those preferences, and then your second user, your third user, your fourth user that logs in, they don't necessarily see those preferences, which is sometimes a good thing, because sometimes, you know, if I want my screen to be green and you want your screen to be blue, y'all don't have to fight back and forth. But you always have two. The company preferences is going to be the company-wide. So if you change a company preference, it's going to change it in all of QuickBooks, so all of the users in there can see it. So on this one, we have the My Preferences shown up. And on My Preferences, we have pressing enter, move between fields, automatically open drop-downs when typing, beeping, recording a transaction. That one, if you're in an office, you probably want to turn that one off, because if you're beeping all day, it probably annoys everybody else. Not that I do that on purpose sometimes. But, so you just want to make sure that you're in the right screen. You might think that you're in the right screen, but you just want to make sure that you toggle between the two, because you get different options between My Preferences and the company preferences. So. If you use inventory, which we're not going to go into too much today on inventory, you have to make sure you turn it on. That's under the items and inventory, and that's under the company preference tab. And you just want to make sure that you check that inventory and purchase orders are active. And that way, that's how you turn on your inventory, so you can keep track of what it is that you have, what it is that you're selling. And that turns on all of the inventory. So if you have manufacturer parts where you order something, and then you create something from that, and then you have your final product, it turns on all of the inventory. The other one that I use a lot is the send forms. I don't know if anybody here creates invoices and then you want to email them. There's a couple of ways that you can do that. You can now save the invoice as a PDF if you have a newer version of QuickBooks, which is fantastic. I use that all the time. The other way that you can do it is you can do under preferences. If you go to send forms, and again, this is under a company preference, you can turn on the email over there, and you can, for invoices here, and you have your basic invoice email, and what that means, if you want to change, that's over there on the right, is the default email address or email message that goes when you send your invoice to someone. So it just basically says your invoice appears below, please remit the payment at your earliest convenience, and then it shows a big PDF on there. You can change that to say whatever it is that you want. If you want to say, you know, if you're a nonprofit and you want to send out pledges, you know, your pledge appears below, you know, you can put terms on there, you can make it say whatever it is that you want, you can have it addressed however you want, you can do your signature however you want. You can also send it more than one way. You can send it via your Outlook email, or you can send it via, QuickBooks can send it through their email as well. And you can also put in here a BCC, so I know when I send out an invoice to someone, I always have a BCC myself, so I make sure that it actually gets sent. Then we have sales tax. Does anybody here use sales tax? Charge sales tax for their items? For everybody that doesn't have sales tax, you might want to go to sleep because it's taxes and everybody hates taxes. So to turn on sales tax, it's again under the preferences, so we're still on the preference screen. And you're going to come down to sales tax, and again, it's a company preference because we're changing the actual QuickBooks file, and we're not changing just what you see in the QuickBooks file. So you're going to say, do you charge sales tax? You're going to say yes. And then you enter your sales tax item. For this one, I think I have it set on for state sales tax. I also put in here a lodging tax, so that we can go over if you have to charge more than one type of tax, because if you have state sales tax, sometimes you have a meals tax, and you have a lodging tax. There's all sorts of different kinds of taxes that we all know that we have to charge and pay, and we love all that. So I'm going to go through how to charge if you have more than one type of tax on here, so it's not just sales tax. So if you turn it on, and then your taxable item code, this there's a drop down and it says either tax, and then you see the non-taxable item code and that says non. You can change what that says if you want to, you don't have to, the only person that's gonna see that is you. It doesn't come up on your invoices, you're the only one that sees that. And then you identify taxable amounts as T for taxable when printing, and that's helpful as well, because when you actually print off your invoice, it's gonna say a little T next to the numbers, so that both you and your customers can tell exactly what is being taxed on your invoices. And then down here, when you owe sales tax, if you are in Virginia, it's probably cash instead of accrual. The state likes you to pay cash. And then when you pay sales tax, that's also determined by the state. You have monthly, quarterly, and annually as your options. And if you don't have a sales tax number, if you're a new business, you just sign up online and do it all online. And then they tell you right there if you're gonna be filing monthly or quarterly. When you are making an invoice for a taxable item, I just did a thing here. I did this as rental fees. I don't know if you know, in the town, anytime that you rent something less than 30 days, you have to pay town sales, or town, it's transient occupancy tax or whatever it is that they're calling it now, I don't know. So we have our rental fees here, and it's taxable. You see tax over there on the right. In the state, if you are staying somewhere less than 90 days, it's taxable. So you may be taxable for state, but not town. You can always change that. Any item that you add to an invoice here, if you have your sales tax turned on, you can always change that. There's a drop down over there where it says tax, and you can toggle between tax and non-taxable. So if you have an item and normally you charge tax to it, but for whatever reason you're not charging tax on it this time, you can just do a drop down there and switch it to non-taxable. And then if you have your second line for taxes, for lodging tax or food and beverage meals tax, the only way that you can really do it right now is create a second line on here and say what it is. And that's the only way right now in QuickBooks that you can charge the double tax. If you have a third tax on there as well, you just create another line and do that too. So you can see we have our Virginia tax over there, and then we also have our town tax.
So, are you saying that if somebody isn't renting for 90, tell me about the 90 days, what did you say, tell me that again.
In the state of Virginia, if you are renting like a house or a room for 90 days or less, it's taxable for the state.
Okay.
In the town here, if it's 30 days or less, it's taxable.
Right.
So if you're renting something for 60 days, it's taxable for the state, but not taxable for the town. So that's why sometimes you may have town sales tax, sometimes you may not. Now, so we have our month end, and we're done with all of our, yes?
What's the difference between town lodging versus town sales?
Same.
So, you fill out the same form and you turn it in, just either mail it, let's do the 20th every month. So we're at the end of the month or at the end of our quarter, and now it's time to pay our sales tax. Well, how do you know what you need to pay? Under the vendors up top, you come down to sales tax, and you come over to the sales tax liability, and you run, it's a report, and you run it. And you have to make sure, first of all, that your date range is correct. And second of all, make sure that you're running it on the correct basis. Remember we talked about cash versus accrual. It's probably going to be cash. And then you have, this is the invoice that I just entered on there. This is all of the information from there. You see we have our town tax, the $70 rate. And then we have our Virginia tax rate. So those are our taxable sales for the month of July, and that's what you're going to report when you report to the state. Now, if you look at a number and you think something is wrong, all you have to do is you go and you double click on the number, and it'll bring up all the transactions that make up that number. So if something's in there and you're like, oh, well, this $70, that's not supposed to be taxable, that's non-taxable. If you click on that, it will bring it up, and then you can toggle it over to non-taxable, rerun the report, and now your report's correct. So you want to make sure that you review the report before you enter anything and send it off. Now it's time to pay our sales tax. Virginia, you cannot send in a check anymore. You used to be able to, but you can't. You now have to pay everything online. I think everybody's moving to that. The banks, you can't pay EFT to your banks anymore. You have to pay that online as well. So, but here's our pay sales tax window. It's under the exact same drop down as before. You go vendors, and then sales tax, pay sales tax. This is the screen that comes up when you do that. So we have our check date. If you run a monthly, your sales tax is due the 20th of the following month. And you show your sales tax due. You want to make sure that that's on the correct date. Since we're paying July sales tax, you want to make sure that that date says July. Otherwise, your numbers probably won't equal the numbers that are on your report. So when you pay your sales tax on time, they give you a discount. And you don't want to just not pay the balance. So for the town tax, it says $3.50, but you might actually only owe $3.25 since you're paying it on time. So what you're going to do is you're going to want to hit adjust, and it comes up with this screen here. And you have your sales tax number. You want to make sure that you pick, if you're paying the state, you want to make sure that you pick the state. The adjustment account is whatever account that you're going to be using. And then you either increase if you're paying late or reduce if you're paying on time. And then you just put in the amount, and then it shows up back on this screen here, and then it keeps your balances at 0, so your reports are right. Any questions on sales tax? Oh, good, well that was easy.
Keep paying them.
Yeah, the bad news is town sales tax is 7, not 5.
I know. But they're different for every town, so. Okay, customizing reports. Customizing reports is something that we all do. I do it very frequently. Just because they have the generic report there, that doesn't mean that that's necessarily what you want it to say, or how you want it to look, or anything like that. And you can customize just about everything in the reports in QuickBooks to make it look like how you want. You can change the font, you can change what it says, you can change anything. So, this is a generic profit and loss, income statement. I'm assuming everybody here knows how to run one of these. So this is what it sometimes looks like. I have it collapsed down so that there's anyway. When you run this report, you only get one column over on the right, and it has your totals. Let's say you want to know what you did for the entire year by month. On the top right, there's a drop down that says show columns. And you can see it says day, week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, half month, month, quarter, year. There's a whole slew of things that you can run your report by. If you do that drop down, and if you pick, week, and you put in a time period, you'll have a column for every single week. I run it by the month very frequently for a lot of people, so you can see how every month is doing. So if you run January through December, and then you change the show columns and you come down to month, you'll have one column for January, one column for February, and so on. You can also, if you have, if you're doing sales by sales rep, like if you have employees and you want to know how much each person is selling, you can come down here and do it by employee, and you can see how much each person is selling. The other thing is class. We're going to touch on class later. The other one I use a lot is class. We'll talk about those in a little bit though. The other thing that you can do is you can add comments to your reports. So we have back here, the revenue, $3,350, but let's say we want to make a comment on that. So up at the top, the second one in, you see comment on report. You push that button and you get this screen here. So if the revenue service, if I want to say, well, this is all from XYZ service, or whatever comment it is that you want to make, you go ahead and you push that button, you enter your comment, there's going to be a checkbox next there, you see a number 1. So if you want to make 2 comments, the second one obviously will have a number 2, and so on and so forth. And then when you print off the report, your first page is going to have the report, and it's going to have numbers next to the number 1, 2, and 3. And then the second page of your report is going to be your list of comments. So everybody can see the comments that you have on your report. This screen, I'll go back here and show you. Let's say we want to change anything else on the screen. You want to change how anything on here looks. On the top left where it says customize, you're going to push that button. And then you're going to come up with this screen. And this one is where you can switch between accrual and cash. So it doesn't matter if you're a cash accounting company, but you just want to see accrual or the other way, you can toggle your reports and do it however you want. You can display columns again, but this is total only. This is the exact same drop down that's actually on the report. And then you also can do sub-columns. Sub-columns means you're going to have your actual column, and then you're going to also have a second column right next to that column. So you can show previous period, previous year, year to date. So if you have, if you're running a report for July, and you want to see what you did also year to date, you come here and you see year to date. So your main column is going to say July, and then your second column that's going to then show up right next to it is going to have January through July. So you can see what you did year to date as well. This is the same screen, but now we're going to start filtering. Let's say that we want to only show something that is a certain account, over or under a certain amount, or if you're classing, you only want to show a certain class. You come over here to filters, and I have class selected, but this shows the same for all of them. You can select all of them. All of them is the default. Multiple means you want to pick more than one, or you can just pick one. And then if you hit OK, then it'll go back to the report, and it'll show you whatever it is that you selected. And on this page, this is the header and footer. And on this screen, this is where you can change if you want it to show up, or if you don't want it to show up, and if it does show up, how you want it to look. So if your company name is Company ABC Incorporated, but you wanted to say on any particular report, you wanted to say Abingdon, Bristol, Chilhowie Incorporated, you can go ahead and do that here, because where it says company name, you can make that say whatever it is that you want. The report title, some people like profit and loss, some people like it to say income statement. You can make that also say whatever you want. Your subtitle is going to be the date range. The date prepared, time prepared, and report basis. Those are those little numbers that are up in the top left-hand corner of the reports that you run. And you can turn those on or off. They don't necessarily always have to be on. It defaults on, but you don't have to have them on. And the print header on pages after the first page, that means that, sometimes if you have a profit and loss statement and it runs 2 or 3 pages, you don't necessarily want that header on the second or third page. So you can turn that on or off as well. And then obviously your page numbers and your footers and all that. Are there any questions about reports?
I've got a lot of them, but I'll wait.
I will say, most of the reporting that I have done, I learned just by going in there and try and just see if it works. You know, if this isn't the way that I want that report to look, I just said, all right, well, let me go try something else. And a lot of it for me with the reporting is trial and error. There's not really anything that you can teach somebody that'll show them exactly that report that they want to do at that exact time. A lot of it is just going in and messing around with the settings and figuring out how it is that you want your reports to look, what it is that you want them to say, and once again, to make sure that you get that information in there so that you can get the reports that you want to get. But you have to make sure that you get that information in there correctly to begin with.
And
Is
what you're
anybody
looking
here?
at is like a 2015 version or 2014 version?
I'm sorry?
What you're teaching right now is like a 2014 version of QuickBooks?
This version is 2015. They have made significant updates in the last couple of years, but the basic reporting options have remained the same.
You talk about going in and fiddling and doing this and doing that, and I'm just envisioning ending up with a gigantic mess. Is there a default button that'll take me back to where I was to sort out my mess?
Yeah, you just rerun the report.
Just rerun the report.
Anything that you do in that report and that you change, and then you've changed it so much, and you say, well, I don't even know what in the world I started out with, I just close it, and it'll say, do you want to memorize this report? And I just say, nope. And I just rerun it. Once, if I am doing a really complicated report, and I know that it's gonna, it takes a while and I have to change a whole bunch of settings and everything, I make sure that I memorize it, because then I don't have to go back and redo all of those settings.
Most of the time you'll get nothing.
I do that too. There's nothing like changing a setting on there and then you come back to the report and it says 0, and I'm like, oh, I think I picked the wrong thing. Okay, does anybody here have, well, first, does anybody have any other questions on reports? Okay, yay. Classes, does anybody here use classes? Quite a few, okay, good. Classes are very confusing. They're more confusing to explain than they are to use, and once you start using them, they become easier, I promise.
I'll take your word for it.
I promise. We'll start by talking about what exactly a class is. You're not trying to use your class to replace your chart of accounts. You're using your class to enhance your chart of accounts. You get cleaner reports, and it's easier to track things. When I say cleaner reports, what I mean is, let's say you have a trucking company, and you have 5 trucks that run. And you want to keep track of all of the expenses and income related to each truck. So you have, let's say your trucks haul gravel, and you have truck A, B, C, D, E. You can do it through your chart of accounts and have your income and your expenses and everything, but how do you keep track of it by each truck? Well, if you have, repairs and maintenance, and then do truck A, truck B, truck C, well, now you have to do, how about gas? Truck A, truck B, truck C, and then your income. Okay, well, truck A, truck B. Well, then your profit and loss, or your income statement, becomes like 27,000 pages long, and it's very confusing, and all you really need is just one line item for each truck account. One line item for each account. And then what you're going to do is you're going to make a class for each truck. So that way, when you come back to your reports, and you run your report, and you have your class columns up there, then you'll have each report that says, repairs and maintenance. Then your class truck A, class truck B, class truck C. So you have one line item for repairs and maintenance, but then you can still keep track of each truck by class. You can also do this for employees. If you have employees that are being paid by different funding sources, you can do it for grants. So you have one class for each grant. And then at the end of the day, hopefully that line down there at the bottom says 0, and if it doesn't, then you have to go figure out what you did wrong. You can do it for, if you're a business office, if you have more than one location. You can have location A, location B. You can have, if you are a rental company, and you have different, I know I have rental properties, and I use classes, so I can tell exactly what each property is doing, and which property, you know, is having a whole lot of repair issues, and what I need to look for. And then you can also do departments. If you have different departments, let's say you have a manufacturing department, and then you have a sales department, and then you have an electronics department. So there's many different ways that you can use classes. You want to use your accounts to identify the what of a transaction, and a class to identify the why or the for. The other way that you can do it is if you want to, if you're hosting an event and you want to only keep track of the expenses for that one event, you can also use a class for that. So, but you want to make sure that you're only using classes for one purpose. So you don't want to say, okay, well, I'm going to use a class for my different locations, but I also want to use a class for, you know, different employees. You want to make sure that you're only using it for one purpose. Otherwise, you're going to get stuck in a situation where you're going to say, well, this particular transaction belongs to both this class, and then what are you going to do?
Okay, can we change the terminology so maybe I can get a grip on this? Is classes the same as a directory? Like, you know, when you're on the computer screen and you're looking at it and you've got documents, you've got pictures, you've got, you know, something along that, scanned items, and then you have your subcategories underneath that. Does it correlate anyway like that?
I try to think of class, most of the time when I'm thinking of class, I replace it in my mind with funding source. So, which isn't necessarily always correct, but usually if you're gonna be using classes, that's gonna be your funding source. So, you know, like if you're talking about a grant, if you have, you know, a tobacco commission grant, or a federal grant, or something like that, you're gonna have a class for that.
So basically, if you were setting it up in the computer, then it would be like a directory, and then you would have your files under that directory.
Yes, unless you're talking about a chart of accounts where you also have files under that. It's kind of,
Yeah, I know, yeah, I know what that looks like.
okay, okay. Did that not answer your question?
Well,
It's more confusing to explain than it is to use.
yeah, but you gotta associate it with something to try to understand why you're using it, so you can use it correctly.
So, but I think what, and if maybe I can interject, in the revenues and the expenses, let's just say in revenues, we have 30 tenants, and we have a, you know, we have each tenant's name in as a customer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then, but if we wanted, if they pay us, for rent, and then maybe they pay us for postage, and then they make, is that kind of what you're talking about, is the different classes of the types? Is that kind of what you're talking about, is the different classes? Right.
So I have, you know, I have 10 tenants. It doesn't matter. I have one rental income line. But underneath that rental income line, I want to know how much each property is paying me.
Right.
So I have a class for each property. So I have a class for 123, 124, and 125 property. So everything that's associated with property 123, I class as property 123. So, and that's both my insurance that I pay out, I put in there. If I have a mortgage on that property, I class it to that as well. If I have, you know, someone come and mow the lawn and I have to pay him, I put that under that class. So everything goes under the same account for every single property, but I class it so that it comes up under each property individually.
Or you could do it by types of property, condominiums,
Correct,
townhouses,
correct.
single residence.
You can make your class whatever it is that you want, and the only person that would normally ever see it is you. It doesn't have any effect on your tax return, it doesn't have any effect on any of the normal reports that you run. Only if you're running a report by class are you gonna see this. So, I mean, yes, you can do it if you have townhouses versus condominiums versus, you know, single homes, yes. So this is what it looks like when you run your profit and loss by class. So I've been talking about, I have, one income line, then I wish this was my income, but it's not. You have one income line, you have, here's cost of goods, and then your expenses. So you only have one account line for each one, but then underneath that, you have nested by class, your new construction, remodel, overhead, and unclassified. Unclassified means you don't have any class associated with it, and if you are using classes, I would recommend that you don't have any transactions unclassified. And here is a good way where you can see if you have something that's unclassified, and then if there is something in that column, again, you just double click on the number, and it'll bring up the transaction, and then you can fix it.
So Karen, when you have classes, this is a profit and loss by class, but you could, if, like Stephanie and I, if I just wanted to see my class, I could see a profit and loss that didn't show anything to do with Stephanie's stuff, but just my profit and loss, right?
Yeah, what you do is you go up to Customize Report, like what we were talking about at the beginning. And I think I actually showed, I had the slide there that actually had on their class where you can pick just one class. Or if you want to pick 2 classes or 3 classes, you go, you hit multiple, and then it brings up another screen, and you can choose whichever ones you want to do.
Okay, back to your previous statement. Are you saying basically that you should balance your class totals to the primary types to ensure that you don't have something misclassed?
Well, you want to always make sure that you're looking at where you're putting your numbers. So, I'm not quite sure what you mean when you say balanced.
Well, if you were running a report of a class type,
Okay?
and all of those types within that income category should equal the total amount of your income total, right? So that I wouldn't have something unclassed or classed incorrectly.
If you run a profit and loss by class, it'll show you every single class that you have for that time frame that you have. So if I'm running it from January through December, and I didn't use a class, it's not going to show that class. It's only going to show the classes that you've used during that time period. And you'll have on there everything in each class. So this particular company is obviously a construction company. So we have new construction, we have remodel, we have overhead, and then we have unclassified. So if you run your regular profit and loss for the same time period that's not classed or anything, you're going to just get that total column. So if you run it by class, now you're going to see the breakout of what makes up that total column. Here we have this much in new construction, this much is in remodel, and then this much is in overhead. So those numbers have to make up your total number, but whatever report that you run, if you're not running a report for your totals, if you only want to see new construction, obviously that report's not going to equal your total profit and loss for that time period. I know there has to be more questions on classes than that.
So when you set up classes, is it a number?
You
To
can-
say, rent 1, 2, 3, or is it, do you number it, say the account number for revenue is 321 for rental income.
Okay?
So then do you, for the class, underneath that, how do you define the class? Is it by a letter, a number, or just a name?
The class is whatever it is that you want to call it. In this particular case, their class names are new construction, remodel, and overhead.
So it sorts on those names and not another number?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. If you have grants, I do it by, I have a couple of people that have USDA grants.
Mhm.
So I have those particular classes set up as USDA and then the grant number. And then I know a lot of people have Tobacco Commission grants, so I have TICRC and then the Tobacco Commission number. So. You know, for my rental business, I just have it as the rental property address.
Okay. But it sorts on the name, not on another numeric or alpha?
No, strictly on the name. If you have, if you have your charter accounts and those are numbered, your
Mhm.
classes don't have to be numbered now.
Okay,
I mean, you can number them, but you don't have
you
to.
don't have to.
I think that he's probably using the same thing that ours was set up with at work. And we have numbers for each, expense for each property.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah, so you have it running through your chart of accounts instead of class.
Right.
Okay. I mean, you can do
If
that.
that's what you call it, I mean, that's why it's confusing, because the terminology is, I'm not familiar.
Well, okay, so if you have 5 properties and you have 5 mortgages on each property, you know, you're gonna have interest on each one of those. So by using a class, instead of saying, you know, mortgage interest for property A, mortgage interest for property B, you know, on your income statement, you're just gonna have one line item that says mortgage interest. And then by class, that's how you can tell how much the interest is for each property, instead of having, you know, a big hunk on your income statement taken up for that.
I see what you're saying, but ours is set up different than that, so.
Well, you don't have to set it up this way.
Yeah, no, that's why I'm just trying to understand.
Okay,
This sounds simple from the way you do it, but ours was set up by using numbers,
okay.
so that's what I'm trying to learn, is how to pull that data together then to get a report on just certain things.
For that one, you might need to, if you have everything already on your line items on your chart of accounts, when you're doing your profit and loss, if you just want to show one property and you have, if it's ran through your chart of accounts like that, you may have to go through and under your property option, or under your report options, I think in the beginning I did that, and there's a drop down on there. You need to just select the accounts for that specific property.
I think it says accounts by vendor or something.
Yeah, you can do by vendor. You can, you know, if you want to see a report that only has one vendor, it's all in the same, it's all in the same options there. I think the one I just showed a class drop down, but it looks exactly the same for every single other one. So if you only want to see certain accounts on your profit and loss, you just hit account name, and then you do the drop down and you hit multiple accounts, and then you select every single account that is associated with that property, and then you'll have your profit and loss for that one property.
Right, I understand that, it doesn't quite work out that way, because,
It never does it?
well, in the memo, a lot of the data pulls from memo. Okay, there are 2 doggone memos, and they don't work the same. I brought printouts so I could,
Yeah, like if you're entering a bill and you want the memo to show up on the check, one will show up on the check and then the other won't, is that what you mean?
well, no, when you get ready to pull data and you're doing searches, and you're using data from those fields.
Well, the memo, if you're searching something from a memo, the memo should show up if you're doing a search on something that's in a memo, it should be pulling from both of those fields.
It does not pull from both memos, that's what my problem's been. There is a subtle difference between the one on the check and the one in the entry field that you have.
Maybe after the class, you all could take a
Yeah.
look at that if you don't mind.
Are there any other questions on classes?
Maybe, you might get some more next week. I'm gonna try to use it
Once again, I mean, really,
next month.
to be honest, I never took any QuickBooks classes, ever. I learned everything just by doing it. And a lot of stuff I messed up and I had to go back and fix. So, I mean, a lot of time, I mean, even journal entries now, I mean, I'm an accountant, and journal entries, I still flip and I have to go back and redo it, so. That's really bad. So, keyboard shortcuts, a lot of the ones that I use a lot, I use the memorized transactional report because once you spend 45 minutes making the report that you actually want, you don't want to spend 45 minutes doing it again, so I memorize it. And find transaction, I use that one a lot. Those are the two I use a lot.
What does find transaction do?
Find transaction, that brings up your search. So if you're looking for a specific amount, like you say, I know that someone paid me $750, you know, I hit Control F and then I enter $750 and then it brings up all of those transactions.
That's what I hoped.
Yes?
Are these shortcuts, do they go across all platforms?
I don't think that they work for online, of course. Now, they do work for the different versions, so it doesn't matter if you're in 2010 or 2015, it will work for the different desktop versions, but online, I don't think so. Because the online, since that is browser driven, it's not the same. The title bar is the bar that shows up underneath where it says File, Edit, and it has all those pictures, and you just push the picture, and then you can write a check. I use that all the time. I don't know if anybody else does here. I use it all the time, so I make sure that everything that I use all the time is on there, like enter bill, create invoice, write check, chart of accounts, journal entries. To change that, you right-click on anywhere on that title bar, and you select Customize, and then, I should have put a picture on here. You select the icon that you want to add, remove, or modify, and then you just hit OK. They put a lot of things on that title bar that you don't really ever use because they want you to click on it and then buy their stuff. So I just take it all off. So there's the title bar up there. This is, oh no, it's not good. The other thing that I use a lot is I run a tape in QuickBooks. You see where it says 50, 75, 100. If you have a lot of transactions, all you have to do is you just run it like a regular 10 key. If you don't know what that is, that's that big desktop that you see all the accountants have, and they just go like this and everything. You can use your keyboard the exact same way in QuickBooks and run it as a 10 key, and there's your tape, and add and subtract and everything in there. When you're done, all you do is hit tab, and it gives you your total.
So how did you bring that up again, please?
I'm sorry?
How did you bring up the running tab?
This, you hit, so I did $50, and then I hit the plus key, and it starts your tape.
Oh, hit the plus key, okay.
Or if you want to subtract, you just hit the minus key or multiply, or it works just like your 10 key calculator. I use that all the time. Try to put one or two things that I use a lot.
So you're just adding up random dollar amounts, nothing associated with that invoice?
No. This is just a sample. This is actually just a sample company. It's not even a real company.
Okay.
And I just made a tape so that you could see what it looks like.
So you're just getting a total of X number of items
Correct.
for your own knowledge?
Right. Or if you say, well, you know, I'll give you a 25% discount, but you don't want to do a discount line, you know, if you just, so you have your normal number on there, and then you just hit, you know, the little asterisk key, and then you do 0.25, and then hit tab, and it's done for you.
So,
Any other questions for today? You gonna mull it over?
so rock and roll.
We went through that pretty fast, I'm surprised.
Don't forget, her next session is August the 12th.
And what is the next session or focus?
I haven't decided yet.
Okay.
You take requests?
Yes, I do.
You got requests?
Yes, I do. I'm hitting online. I'm gonna do a whole day of online.
Next
So
session or the last session?
I might do a half and half next, and then full the last, because I know that there's a lot of online users, and online and desktop are very different. I mean, it's all the same information, but how you enter it and how it comes back out is very different. So. Well, thank you everybody for coming.
So I guess we can get back, maybe Sharon, with Sharon and the, does anybody have any more questions now that we're through the thing about the class set up?
The classes sound very, very hard, and it's really hard to explain what a class is and how it's going to look. It's just really hard to explain. And I actually asked a couple of my friends, and they said the exact same thing. They said, well, I know how to use it, but how do you explain it to someone?
Yeah.
So,
I agree, you just have to play with it and do it yourself, and nothing's permanent if you don't record the transaction, nothing's permanent.
even if you record it, you can change it.
Yeah, so, just play with it and make mistakes.
The easiest comparison I can make is just a rental company, because everybody knows what that is, everybody knows what it looks like.
Our next new rule. Okay, so if nobody has any more questions,
I have one.
okay.
I didn't get to come to the first week because I didn't know about it in time. And you had an extra of these on the first session. And the reason is I went on YouTube, but you cannot see the screen. You can't tell anything about it.
Leave us your email address and we'll email it to you.
Yeah.
So it made it a little bit hard to know what she was really talking about.
Yes, ma'am, that's why we encourage you to attend.
I would have had it though, or I would have.
Oh, I know. So the next session with Karen is gonna be August the 12th, and that'll be session number 3 for QuickBooks. Next week, July the 22nd, we are continuing our social media classes, and this one will be LinkedIn. We had a really good Facebook and Instagram session a week ago, and now we're gonna follow through with LinkedIn. And again, if you've missed something or you wanna know the answer to something, somebody sent me a text, about the Facebook class, and I went back and watched it on New Knowledge, and you're correct, you can't see the screen, but you can hear the explanation and kind of figure out from there. But LinkedIn on July the 22nd, and
I will say the LinkedIn instructor is, she's over the social media for Eastman Chemical. So, she's pretty knowledgeable and is from, originally from Knoxville, so she's been in social media for a while. So I'm looking forward to the next session myself. We're lucky to have her.
the other thing that has occurred in the last little bit, our classes are growing in popularity, and so people have said to me, well, how do we get on your email list? If you or somebody in your organization that you think can benefit from some of the classes we're having, if you will give Jennifer or have them email Jennifer, which her card's out on the desk as you leave. If you'll have them email her, she'll put them in her group MailChimp, and so she can, send those emails out, and if they decide they don't want to be in that email list, they can just unsubscribe. So,
And
thank
if you
you
have
all.
people that are unable to come physically, we do this live streaming, and it does require a live stream account, which is free, and then when they join the New Knowledge live stream group, then they will receive an email with the direct link the day of the session.
Yeah. Okay, so any more questions, comments, or issues?
Give a
Thank
hand
you,
to
Karen.